how is it different to taking ecstasy or some of the other drugs? So how would you help us understand what is the difference between like some of these party drugs, especially like ecstasy and psilocybin? And obviously that's the greater context of other plant medicines as well. And I believe my hallucination is that there's a certain degree of teaching and sacredness around it. But the experience of party drugs, like recreational drugs, is there any difference?
First off, I would say that I have no particular qualms with party drugs, nor party at all. Also, party drugs refers to drugs that are used, I would say, in a recreational context for pleasure, which could include pleasure as an escape, but they're not necessarily just like one lump. Like these kinds of drugs, there's like multiple different classes and chemical structures and all the rest. So you could just say it's the difference in so far as party drugs and sacred medicine is sometimes it's really just intention because it could be the same drugs. In regards to, say, the difference between MDMA and something like, say, psilocybin mushrooms, well, multitude. One of which is MDMA is not a trip, it's a roll, where mushrooms are a trip. If you combine them together, it's a flip, but that's for your audience to Google if they like. No, but for example, ecstasy. I mean, ecstasy is a pressed tablet that you generally don't know what's in there unless you are, lucky enough to live in a country that is smart enough on the government level, mature enough on the government level to allow for drug testing, for facilitated drug testing without criminal consequence for possession. You don't know what's in it, right? But ideally, a good ecstasy tablet is a combination of MDMA and some kind of stimulant, usually meth or amphetamine or something. So it makes you feel all lovey, and it also makes you want to dance all night, right? So that would be an ecstasy tablet. Even MDMA itself, if you were just to take so-called pure MDMA, although oftentimes these days pure MDMA is sold in powder, but it's actually ecstasy in powder form because it's cut with different things. But even that, MDMA is totally different than psilocybin in the sense that MDMA and psilocybin create totally different experiences, right? And I could take psilocybin at a party and I could possibly get myself overwhelmed, or I could just flat out have a good time, as I have, And I could also take MDMA in a ceremony and access what is a profoundly holy state, truly. Like the space that one enters and when in MDMA, I think it is a beautiful sacred space that I think that, save for the legalities of suggesting anyone do anything illegal, I think that it's incredibly valuable for a person to have an MDMA experience, the same way I think it's incredibly valuable for people who are inclined towards it to have a sexual experience, or to have a psychedelic experience. So it really comes down to intention. Normally when we are taking substances at parties, we're probably doing it to get wild, get crazy, have a good time, have a positive experience, possibly connect with friends, dance, a number of things. And that could be totally neutral intentions, which is like, I'm just having a good time, to positive intentions in a party space, which is like, I'm going to do this to open up so I can connect more with others. Okay. To maybe something a little bit more muddy, like, I need to do this because otherwise I don't feel good about myself as a person and I hate my life. Okay, so now we're into a muddy area, right? But that's still a matter of intention rather than necessarily behavior and substance and environment. Then you get into something like sacred medicines. Could be any number of other things that I just spoke about. You could have a sacred intentional experience, but it usually isn't about necessarily having a good time, but having a meaningful time. And the context there can change. That can be in a group. It could be in a group where you're focusing on yourself. It could be a group where you're focusing on each other. It could be alone. It could be alone with a sitter. It could be with a sacred plant, such as ayahuasca, which is a combination of plants, for example. Or it could be with something entirely chemical, like LSD. I mean, LSD is a naturally derived compound that comes from a fungus as well. But, it could also be mushrooms or something, which is not a plant, it's a fungi, but technicalities maybe. So it really comes down to intention. And oftentimes when people are entering sacred medicine, for example, you can just hear it in the tone. There's a different feel, there's a different why that's sort of leading that choice. Sacred medicine, medicine, healing. Okay, sacred, not the profane. Something that requires tending to, something that requires carefulness in handling, something worthy of reverence. So now you have a totally different tone of things. And neither that even discusses, say, therapy, which might be somewhere in the middle. But therapeutic intention could fall into sacred medicine. They could also fall into party. So it's not so much hard categories as it is gradients, like a color wheel, all sort of roots down into basically what is your intention and in what context of use, where intention is a part of that context.